Hello and welcome to this repair overview tutorial, and today you're going to look at an Arcam Alpha 7R amplifier. So general specifications: the amplifier can deliver 40 watts per channel into 8 ohms. Frequency response is 20 Hz to 20 kHz. Total harmonic distortion 0.01%, so that's standard. And then input sensitivity for the moving magnet input, so where you connect a turntable without the need for an external equalizer stroke preamplifier, is 3 millivolts. And then for all of the other line inputs, that's 275 millivolts. And you also have a preamp output as well, so that will deliver 0.5 volts if you need to drive an external amplifier. And input impedance typically there is 4 to 16 ohms. And standard dimensions for such integrated amplifiers, so in terms of height 85 millimeters, and then a width of 430, and the depth is 330. And not a heavy amplifier, this one, so coming in at 4.5 kilograms or thereabouts. Now when this amp came into the workshop, it wouldn't power up at all, so that tends to indicate that there has been a failure of the input power protection fuse, and that's shown in the video. So when that has happened, that tells me that there is a short circuit. Now it may well be a failure of the output Mosfets, or it could be another issue which is causing that. So here again, and I often refer to this, of taking a systematic approach. The first thing that I'm going to go to is the most common cause of such a problem. So indeed what I'll do is I just remove the bolts at the rear of the amplifier where it clamps a metal plate to the front of the two output Mosfets for each one of the channels. And what I'm doing, I just set my meter to resistance, and I'm just measuring across the output Mosfets then for each one, right? So I just checking to see if there's a short circuit, and there isn't. Both channels, two sets of Mosfets each, all check out good, no short circuit. So then I'm thinking, okay, what's the next most common issue associated with a failure? So I then put back the fixing bolts with the metal clamps back onto the Mosfets, and then I'll go and investigate what's going on with the toroidal transformer. Is there an issue there, or is there maybe an issue on the secondary of the transformer that's causing the excess current draw? So the good thing with this amp is it uses spring terminals. So the first thing that you need to do is just disconnect via the spring terminals the secondary output windings then to the amp, right? So this is an R series, so it has the microcontroller which drives the volume control via the motorized controller to the DC motor on the back of the volume control, and that provides 9 volts AC as the nominal voltage before it's rectified. And it also provides as well 30 dual secondary output to power the main amp. So once I release the springs, remove the wires, I can then make a test. Now I have in series, as with all amplifier repairs, a dim bulb tester. So as soon as I put power back onto the amp, there's no secondary connected to the rest of the amplifier. It's just the toroidal which is being powered, but there are some, a few snubber components, noise components, which are on the input circuit. But all I want to do here is I want to verify, is the dim bulb going to light brightly, or is it going to not? Straight away, as soon as I apply power, that dim bulb lights up very, very bright. So that's telling me now you have a short circuit on the primary side of that transformer. So what I then do is I can then, again via the spring terminals, I can release the primary from the rest of the board. Now I'm not going to power up the transformer at that point. All I do is I just put my meter on the Euro input socket on the live and neutral, and I'm just verifying that none of those snubber components have gone short circuit. So you see in the repair video where I've taken a snapshot from the service manual, you have C15 and C26, which are 4.7 nanofarad filter caps, and neither of those were short circuit. And then there's also another 4.7 nanofarad capacitor, C201, which is connected across the main switch again for noise suppression. And because it didn't read short circuit, either live neutral or to earth, neutral to earth, I know that it is the primary of the transformer that's gone short circuit. So when you try and remove it, remember that you've got to really do the complete strip down. So you've got to remove the main amp board from the chassis. So 5 screws at the rear, and then you'll have 1 screw which is located near to the speaker protection relay, and then 3 towards the front, and then you then need to release 2 screws either side, remove the control knobs, and then you can unclip the front plastic fascia, and then at the top left and right you have 2 other fixing screws which lock in the front fascia metal cage which has the volume control and the user controls mounted. And then once you do that, you can remove the toroidal transformer fixing bolt, and then just this small little plastic standoff, just press it in with a pair of pliers, and then you can extract the complete amp board with the toroidal. Now during manufacture, what they do is they use a self-adhesive circular pad, and this thing glues that transformer to the board very, very strongly. So don't go in there with a thin blade screwdriver. You really want to use almost like a metal scraping tool, because you want to distribute the pressure as you're levering that up. If you use something very narrow, then that focal pressure that you're trying to break that bond between the main board via the adhesive fixing pad and the amp to a specific point. You don't want to crack the board, right? It's going to flex to some degree, but you've got to distribute it, so use that, and then just take your time, just prise it up, and then you'll hear it then start to break away, and then once it's then clear, it's a case then of fitting a replacement transformer. Now for myself, I hold these transformers in stock, so I don't have to go to the task of trying to source them. But if you did, then you can see from the specifications here, it would probably be easier to support or to source a dual primary transformer, 230, 115 and 0, and then give yourself 30, 90, 30. It's more difficult trying to get that spec and then also have the 9 volt AC feed, which I said before is also providing power to the microcontroller, which operates the volume control via the motorized controller circuit, and also puts the amplifier into mute. But if there's an issue, of course, on that side of the circuit, then the amplifier will not come out of standby mode, and you could be faced with the issue that the LED for the power will not go green, it just stays an amber or orange colour. So once the toroidal transformer was refitted, only a case of cutting the wires then to size, and then what I'm doing is I just tin the ends of the wires, not leaving them all cable stranded, and then operate the spring terminals, and then just insert the relative connections to the right point. Now some of these amplifiers come through the workshop and they do have dual primaries, so what I have is a universal type, but some amplifiers don't. You'll come across some of these 7 series amplifiers or even 8 series, and there's not a 115 volt center tap at all. It's just 230 and then 0. And then the same also for your protection fuses as well. I'll show it in the video, but your protection fuse FS201 is a T1.25 amp protection fuse. Sometimes maybe a user has a failure and then they'll go in there investigating, and then they see the fuse socket, which is FS202, and go and put a fuse in there. Don't do that, not if you're based in the UK, that's for sure. And if they're in the States, then it's going to be FS202 that you're going to be looking at. What you'll find on the board as well is there's a small little clip, and then there's normally a spare fuse which is mounted underneath there then. But I'll put the specifications in terms of VA rating in the technical write-up for this video, which if you just click on more on the left hand side, you can then see that. Now once you replace the transformer, remember also that you will need to check the bias, okay, because all transformers have a tolerance, it may not be identical, so you then need to readjust the bias for each one of the output channels, and in this case I just set it to approximately 2.2 millivolts for each one of the output Mosfet stages, and that then is back to factory. Now with all of these Arcam Alpha series amplifiers, it would not be justifiable simply to replace the toroidal transformer which has failed and do no other work. If that was done and then it was then provided back to the customer would have the same age related issues that you have with all of these amplifiers. So I've mentioned this in other tutorial videos. I have to do other work. So that other work means working through the amplifier and reflowing all of the dry joints that you find on the input RCA sockets, dry joints that you'll find on the Mosfets, also then on the Euro input power supply socket, move to the headphone socket, reflow, because there's always soldered crack joints there, and then on the user control potentiometers. So this is where you have the balance control, volume, treble control, and then also the bass, reflow all of those, and then you then arrive at the most common cause of intermittent sound or audio loss, which is the input selection switch. So undo the fixing bolt, desolder it, and again, as shown in the video, you're able then to disassemble the switch. Make sure you keep the orientation the same. You don't want to get the actual switch out of orientation and then reassemble it, so you make sure it's in the correct orientation. And then you can use a glass fibre pencil to clean off all the oxidization off the metal contacts, and then I normally use De-Oxit then as final lubricating grease, and then I can then reassemble it. When you insert it into the board, and I've said this on previous tutorials, once you fit the locking nut, press down on the board as hard as you can to make sure that all of the pins of the switch go through, because there's a common place where it could just spring up and you're not getting a good positive full solder connection on the full length of those pins. Once that's then done, you can then clean the user controls then with a De-Oxit or a high specification switch cleaner, and just make sure that you have noise-free operation then. And then it's a simple case of just reverse assemble to what you did before. So just fit into the main chassis. You may in some cases, and I have these again in stock, is I have to change the fixing bolt for the toroidal transformer. The one that I fit has a higher spec than the original, and it's slightly higher, and it has a potted seal for really no mechanical noise that can be generated. So I just put a longer bolt in there, but it has a captive fixing nut anyway, so it just comes through. And then final sort of functional test with the amplifier on load, and then the cleaning then of the amplifier. So that brings us to the end of this repair tutorial. So again, if you have any questions or you need more insight, by all means come back to me, and you can email audioamplifierservicing@aol.com, and I'll be more than happy to respond back to you. All right, so until the next time, thank you for stopping by, and take care of yourselves. Bye bye.